There is a house in California with 160 rooms, 2,000 doors and staircases that lead directly into ceilings. Its owner built it for 38 years without stopping, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and never once explained why. When she died, workers stopped mid-nail. Tools were left where they fell. The house stood unfinished, and the reports of something moving inside began almost immediately. There is a prison in Philadelphia where inmates were hooded every time they left their cells, not to prevent escape, to prevent them from learning the layout, to keep them permanently disoriented, permanently lost. The psychological destruction was so complete that doctors documented it in real time. The prison closed in 1971. The cell blocks were abandoned, and then the reports started, not from ghost hunters, from a locksmith, from tour guides, from historians, all describing the same thing in the same locations. There is a Château in France where a woman was murdered in 1477. Her killer was fined and released. She was buried on the estate. And for 547 years, through different centuries, different owners, different guests who had no way of knowing each other's experiences, the same figure has been seen in the same tower room, in the same green dress, with the same ruined face, 3 locations. 3 histories that left something behind that refuses to leave. We are not talking about legend. We are not talking about rumor. We are talking about documented testimony spanning centuries, about a government-protected landmark where the paranormal reports come from historians, not ghost hunters, about a prison where a working locksmith saw faces emerge from the walls, about a castle where the current owner, who still lives there, does not deny what his guests report. Tonight we go inside all 3, and we let the evidence speak. Sarah Lockwood Winchester was born in 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut. She married William Wirt Winchester in 1862, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, manufacturers of what became known as the gun that won the West. The Winchester rifle was the most prolific firearm in American history. It killed hundreds of thousands of people, soldiers, civilians, Native Americans during the westward expansion. It made the Winchester family extraordinarily wealthy. It also, according to Sarah Winchester, made them extraordinarily cursed. In 1866, Sarah's only child, an infant daughter named Annie, died from a rare disease just weeks after birth. In 1881, William Winchester died of tuberculosis at 43, leaving Sarah an estate of approximately $20 million and a 50% stake in the Winchester Company, generating roughly $1,000 per day in income. Following William's death, Sarah sought counsel from a medium in Boston. The medium's message, according to accounts Sarah later shared with trusted associates, the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles were pursuing the Winchester family. Annie's death and William's illness were their work. To appease them and protect herself, Sarah must build a home for these spirits and never stop building it. In 1884, Sarah purchased an unfinished farmhouse in San Jose, California. Construction began immediately and continued for 38 years without stopping, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, until the morning of September 5, 1922, when Sarah Winchester died in her sleep at age 83. The result is one of the most architecturally bizarre structures in the world. The house contains 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, many opening to walls, floors, or 10-foot drops into the gardens below, staircases that lead directly into ceilings, a door on the 4th floor that opens to empty air above the garden, windows built into floors, chimneys that stop just below the ceiling, a room built around another room, skylights installed in floors, stairs with steps only 2 inches high, designed, historians believe, to accommodate Sarah's severe arthritis. Most famously, the seance room, a small windowless chamber at the center of the house accessible only through Sarah's private suite via a series of hidden passages. Every morning, according to servants, Sarah would enter this room alone and remain for hours. She would emerge with architectural plans sketched out, designs for whatever was to be built that day. Workers who built the house for decades reported that Sarah never explained her decisions. Stairwells were built, sealed, then built again in different directions. Rooms were completed and then walled off permanently. Entire sections of the house were demolished and rebuilt multiple times. Whether this was genuine spiritual communication, the manifestation of severe mental illness following devastating personal losses, or an elaborate system to confuse and disorient any intruder, human or otherwise, no one knows. Sarah never publicly explained. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake severely damaged portions of the house. Sarah was reportedly trapped in a sealed room for several hours following the quake. After her rescue, she had workers seal off the front 30 rooms of the house permanently, allegedly because the earthquake was punishment from spirits angry that she was building too quickly. When Sarah died in 1922, workers immediately stopped construction. Mid-nail, mid-wall, mid-staircase, tools were left where they lay. Construction materials remained in hallways. The house was abandoned as a work in progress. Today, the Winchester Mystery House is a National Historic Landmark, receiving 150,000 visitors annually. It operates guided tour during the day and paranormal investigation tour at night. Reports from visitors and investigators over decades have included unexplained cold spots in specific rooms, consistently in the same locations across different visits and different years. The Grand Ballroom, a room Sarah reportedly never completed to her satisfaction, is most frequently cited. Doorknobs turning without anyone touching them, observed by multiple witnesses simultaneously. Apparitions, a woman in Victorian dress seen on the upper floors, in the seance room corridor, and near the tower. Audio recordings capturing voices and sound in empty sealed rooms. Whether these experiences are genuine or the product of an extraordinarily suggestive environment, the Winchester Mystery House remains what Sarah perhaps intended, a place where you cannot be entirely certain what is real and what was designed to mislead. Eastern State Penitentiary opened in 1829 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was considered one of the most influential buildings in American history, a revolutionary experiment in criminal justice that would be studied and replicated by prison systems around the world. The philosophy was Quaker-inspired. Criminals were not evil, they were spiritually lost. If you could force a person into complete isolation and silence, they would be compelled to reflect on their crimes, find God, and emerge reformed. The word penitentiary comes from this concept, a place of penitence. The reality was something darker. Each inmate at Eastern State received a single cell, approximately 8 feet by 12 feet, with a small exercise yard attached. A single skylight was installed in the ceiling, called the Eye of God. Inmates were expected to interpret this single source of natural light as divine surveillance. When inmates were moved between locations, to the shower, to medical, to their exercise yard, they were hooded. A heavy cloth bag placed over the head so they could not learn the layout of the prison. They could never map their environment, never know where the exits were, never orient themselves within the structure. All communication between inmates was prohibited. Meals were delivered through a slot in the door. Exercise was taken alone. No contact with other human beings was permitted. The psychological consequences were catastrophic and were documented even by contemporary observers. Charles Dickens visited Eastern State in 1842 and wrote extensively about what he witnessed. He described the inmates as hollow, disconnected, barely present. He wrote that the punishment inflicted on men by isolation and silence was more destructive than any physical cruelty he had witnessed, because it destroyed the mind while leaving the body intact. He called it a slow and daily tampering with the mysteries of the brain. Medical reports from the institution's own doctors during the 19th century documented widespread psychological breakdown among the inmate population. Hallucinations were common. Catatonia was frequently observed. Some inmates appeared to lose the ability to speak coherently after extended isolation. The prison housed some of America's most notorious criminals. Al Capone was imprisoned there in 1929 for carrying a concealed weapon. His cell, compared to others, was luxurious, furnished with ornate furniture, a radio, lamps, and artwork. He reportedly bribed prison officials. Visitors described it as more like a comfortable office than a prison cell. But Capone's stay was reportedly troubled. Guards documented that he frequently woke in the night screaming, reportedly haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day massacre Capone had ordered. He reportedly called out to Jimmy to leave him alone. Whether this was genuine psychological disturbance or performance, multiple guards independently documented it. Eastern State housed inmates until 1971 when it was closed. The buildings were abandoned, left to deteriorate. For 20 years, the cell blocks crumbled. Paint peeled in long strips revealing stone walls beneath. Trees grew through cell floors. Vines pulled at the crumbling mortar. The facility became one of the most extensively documented examples of American urban decay. In 1994, it was opened for public tour. What visitors and investigators found inside has been consistently reported across decades. The most frequently reported experience figures in cell block 12. Multiple independent visitors over multiple years have described seeing a dark, human-shaped figure in the deteriorating eastern cell block. The figure appears at the far end of the block and retreats when approached. No physical explanation has been found. The area is fully enclosed and access controlled. Cackling faces reported in the locksmith's basement. Shadow figures in cell block 6. A ghostly arm reaching from a cell in cell block 4. Gary Johnson, a locksmith hired in the 1990s to restore century-old locks, reported that while working in cell block 4, he had the distinct sensation of being watched. And then, as he removed one of the locks, he described faces appearing from within the walls themselves and a rush of figures moving through the cell block around him. He left immediately. He would not return. Today, Eastern State receives 100,000 visitors annually. It operates as a museum and historic site. Its annual Halloween event, Terror Behind the Walls, is considered one of the finest haunted attractions in the United States. But the reports from inside the actual historic cell blocks, not the theatrical haunted attraction, from researchers, tour guides, and investigators, are consistent, documented, and have never been satisfactorily explained. In a building where the human mind was systematically dismantled for 142 years, something appears to remain. From a prison that broke the mind, to a Château where a ghost has been witnessed for 6 centuries. Château de Brissac stands in the Maine-et-Loire department of western France, in the Loire Valley. It is the tallest Château in France, 7 stories, 204 rooms, construction spanning 5 centuries. It has been owned by the de Brissac family since 1502, making it one of the longest continuously owned noble estates in European history. The current Duke of Brissac, the 13th Duke, still lives there with his family, and he has a permanent, uninvited resident. In the 15th century, before the current structure was built, a Château stood on the same grounds. It was owned by Jacques de Brissac, Count of Maulevrier. His wife was Charlotte de Valois, the illegitimate daughter of King Charles VII of France. In 1477, Jacques de Brissac discovered Charlotte in the Château with a hunting companion, reportedly in a compromising situation. In a rage, Jacques murdered both Charlotte and the man. He was subsequently tried for the murder by the French Parliament. He was found guilty and fined, the equivalent of a royal slap on the wrist for a man of his standing. Charlotte de Brissac was buried on the estate, and according to 6 centuries of documented testimony, She never entirely left. The apparition is known as La Dame Verte, the Green Lady. She is seen consistently in the same location, the tower room, specifically in what was the chapel of the original Château. Witnesses across centuries describe her in the same terms, a woman in a green dress. Her face is not intact. Witnesses describe her features as decomposed, visible bone where eyes and nose should be. She stands. She watches. The Château has hosted French royalty. King Louis XIII stayed there. It was used as a residence by various French noble families across centuries. Every generation of owners has documented sightings of the Green Lady. The current Duke of Brissac does not dismiss the reports. In documented interviews, he has acknowledged that the apparition is a consistent and long-standing part of the Château's history, and that staff and overnight guests report encounters regularly. The Château opens portions of its estate as a bed and breakfast. Guests pay to stay overnight in historic rooms. Reviews and documented accounts from guests over decades consistently reference sounds from the tower at night, described as footsteps, and a low moaning or crying that doesn't correspond to any environmental source. The temperature in certain corridor sections, dropping suddenly and severely regardless of season. Multiple guests independently reporting seeing a woman in Green Inn or near the tower wing late at night, before being told about the legend upon checkout. In 2014, a group of paranormal investigators were granted access to conduct overnight research. Their thermal imaging cameras recorded a human-shaped form in the tower room that did not correspond to any of the team members' positions. The footage was inconclusive but could not be explained. What makes Château de Brissac's case particularly compelling is the historical continuity. This is not a story that began in the 20th century or was created for tourism. The records of Charlotte de Braissé's murder are historical fact, documented in French parliamentary court records from 1477. The Château has been owned by the same family for over 500 years, and the sightings predate any commercial motivation by centuries. Charlotte de Valois was murdered in a moment of rage. Her murderer was fined and released. Justice, by any measure, was not served. And 6 centuries later, something remains in that tower. Still watching, still appearing, still wearing green. Sarah Winchester built a labyrinth for 38 years. Stairs to nowhere, doors to walls, rooms sealed inside rooms. She died and the hammer stopped, and the reports of what she invited in have never stopped. Eastern State Penitentiary processed 75,000 inmates over 142 years. It broke minds deliberately, systematically, for over a century. It has been abandoned for 50 years, and the experiences reported inside its cell blocks remain consistent, documented, and unexplained. Charlotte de Braissé was murdered in 1477. The man who killed her paid a fine and walked free. For 547 years, guests and owners of the Château have seen her in the same room, in the same dress, with the same ruined face. 3 locations, 3 histories that left something behind. Here is what makes haunted location reports credible when they span centuries. People don't share stories. A guest at the Château de Brissac in 1600 had no way to communicate their experience to a guest in 1900. A prisoner at Eastern State in 1870 had no internet forum to post their experience on, yet the reports align. That consistency, across time, language, and culture, is harder to dismiss than any single account. Have you visited any of these locations, stayed overnight, experienced anything in the historical areas beyond the tourist route? Drop your account in the comments. Share this with someone who doesn't believe in haunted places. These aren't campfire stories. These are documented histories with centuries of consistent witness testimony. Subscribe to WhisprFrame for more haunted locations, where the history is as disturbing as the reports. Because some places remember what happened inside them, and they make sure their visitors do too.